You sure? I don't have a notification.
There you go.
Normally,
Happy?
meetings recorded. Yeah, got it.
Perfect.
See it now.
Okay, my lovely, lovely cam members. This is the awesome Robert Falconer Taylor. He is going to blow your marbles because he is an intelligent soul. And tonight we're just going to drift. We're going to really drift in conversation. He's made it really clear that A, he's open to questions, but it's not going to be a hard and fast kind of this is how you're supposed to think. We're going to tackle different topics, aren't we, Robert?
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun
Yes.
and talk about some controversial things. I hope, and
Yeah,
things maybe if people want to put things into chat,
that would be lovely. Exactly.
they want to
So,
think they'd like us to kind of talk about or cover.
can you please tell people about your backgrounds, how you come to be where you are, how you come to be lecturing here, there, and everywhere, and everybody knows you?
Well, where shall I start? Let's start at the beginning. I came into veterinary 1981, so I'm kind of old school in that sense. I spent a few decades doing practice, and when the millennium came, I thought, right, time for a change, and I started moving over into behaviour. Actually, long story short, from that transition was that I started to get actually quite bored and fed up and frustrated with the way veterinary medicine worked. I loved the animals, I loved the clients, but I didn't like the timetables, the time constraints of 10-minute consults. I found that I never completed anything properly. So there was all this unfinished work. At least we had continuity where we saw the same clients all the time. With a lot of you don't have that luxury now. Nonetheless, that kind of frustrated me. So at that time, there was a lot of interest on the TV. There were lots of programs with these behaviorists on TV doing stuff with dogs. There was even old Barbara Woodhouse, remember her? I saw
Yes.
her in my vet student days, and I worshipped her. I thought she was terrific. I know she gets a lot of bad flack now, but people like her really opened the door to common folks like me and to your average dog owner to dog behavior. So what I found when I started thinking that mindset, I started realizing that a lot of the things that I was seeing in dogs and in the worried owners were probably just as much behavior related as they were clinical related, i.e., you could feel unwell with a kidney disease, a chronic kidney disease in a cat, for example. But what concerned me was the never talking about actually about how the animals felt, because certainly in those days it was an absolute taboo to talk about emotions in animals. Um, it certainly wasn't in the scientific literature. So that kind of piqued my interest, and I gradually drifted over and became a full-time animal behaviorist about 2005. I then did a lot of work, groundwork, actually working with dogs mainly, and cats and other animals that came my way, and then went over into education because I got frustrated with the doing one-to-ones because I felt all I was doing is spending an awful lot of time helping one dog and one owner. Whereas if I was actually doing education side of it, and I could speak to lots of different dog owners or dog behaviorists and trainers all at the same time, I'd actually be helping a lot of them um, with the same amount of work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was
yeah.
very interested in kind of science stuff and many transitions. And here I am now in 2025 and I'm talking to you.
So I'm going to grab something in your narrative that I think is a really good launch pad because it
Right.
really resonated with me. You said back then we weren't allowed to talk about emotions in animals, and that's very true from when I qualified 23 years ago.
Yes.
It wasn't it wasn't that just wasn't taught, it was almost frowned upon. Um, and we went through the era where we were not allowed to anthropomorphize. So you were not allowed to give any kind of human traits and humanity to the animals that you cared for. It was a very biomedical approach to veterinary medicine. Would
Yeah.
you
It was.
suggest the
Yeah.
same?
Yeah, it is, and it comes down to this controversy between the psychiatrists on the one hand and the neurologists or neuroscientists on the other, where everything is to be objectively measured. If we go turn the clock back to people like John Watson, 1912, Frank Skinner, 1935, Ivan Pavlov, 1896 or something, they're all names that we recognize in the behavior world, but all of their remit was totally orientated towards looking at what the animal does And now in modern behavior, we have the applied animal behavior science, which basically is only what you see is what matters. Nothing else matters behind the scenes. And that was aided and abetted by the way that neuroscience works, in the fact that it has to be objective. You cannot infer something which is subjective on a non-verbal animal, which is kind of crazy, because it kind of puts us at the pinnacle of being able to express ourselves, and every other animal on Earth suddenly becomes subordinate to us, and their feelings don't matter. Only what you can see or see and measure matters.
I'm just going to
And
grab the opportunity though, because I know where
um,
tonight might go.
um,
I've
yeah,
just
and
got
just
to
one
say
little
this.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah, can
Okay.
I add one tiny other thing
Go on then.
first, just that reinforces that? You would not get a paper published in a neuroscience or biological journal if you mentioned the word feeling or emotion in it, applying
Yeah.
to an animal. It was absolute taboo. You had to say emotion like or feeling like.
Yeah. And I can
Okay.
remember that it was animal ethology and human
Yeah.
psychology. They were
Yes.
distinct differences
Yes.
because I was taught, and you're going to correct me, but psychology, Greek psyche is soul, and animals weren't believed to have souls, so they weren't allowed to have psychology. So that's why it was behavior, ethology. But I'm just going to use that little starting point
Mm.
to also ask the audience to have forgiveness with vets, because I'm supposedly in the mid of my career, coming towards the end, I hope. No, I'm joking. But in my era, when I qualified, it was frowned upon, so I wasn't taught what I know now. And there are going to be many vets out there, same training as me. And I don't think it has come heavily into the syllabus yet. I don't think behavior is done very well yet. And many vet students and graduates that come out, they are seriously overloaded with
Yes.
biomedical veterinary medicine, that there
Oh,
is no
absolutely.
room, is there?
No, and the thing is, you can't be good at everything.
No.
And the irony is that we have specialisms within the veterinary profession. We have orthopedic specialists, internal medicine specialists, neurology specialists. Hannah's frozen, I think, but we'll kind of carry on. Neurology specialists. But what we don't have, or at least what is a very new industry, are behavioural specialists. And still, a lot of veterinarians basically dispute the legitimacy as behaviour as a specialism. So that's the odd thing. And I think what's going to happen is all these old dinosaurs have got to die, and then we get the new breed of people. But the problem is then that we then have as Anna says, loads and loads of people coming qualified up to their eyeballs with stuff that they're never going to use because it was of no interest to them at all, and they've got no room to do behaviour. And yet, what the literature says and what all the leaflets say and what the drug companies say is that if you have a behavioural problem, you need to go and speak to your vet.
Mm.
And that's the kind of last person necessarily you particularly want to speak to. You need to speak to somebody who's got more of a psychology background. And unfortunately, there are an awful lot of now bogus people calling themselves behaviourists and trainers who have never studied the science, basically, and have built this huge power up on via social media. So yeah, it's a big chasm, and I have to deal with them every day.
So let's go there for a
practices.
little bit. First of all, the actual official term for a dinosaur is supposedly a Luddite, I learnt.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah, it's
veterinary professionals that are
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs are Luddites.
Yes.
Anyway, well, let's use your current situation to start launching into a more kind of topic about emotional health, emotional well-being, etc. So let's use the Springer Spaniel's situation that you're in now. And maybe you could talk about a few of the scenarios you've been in recently where you're dealing with fosterers, the Springer Spaniel, the vet, yourself. And maybe we can dive into a few kind of scenarios, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. As I became a trustee of Springer Rescue about 15 years ago now, Springer Rescue Scotland, remember the word, go and look it up on the internet. We're a big charity. We only deal with spaniels in Scotland. So Springer Spaniels, Cocker Spaniels, Spaniel Crosses, who are honorary spaniels. We'll take those as well. And on average, we rehome about 150 a year dogs.
Good going.
Most of those go to new homes. Some of them go to permanent foster. So if they're old arthritic dogs, that need constant medical care, we'll hang on to those for life. And we always take dogs back. So we do have people giving dogs back because the old owner's died or there's been a problem. They have to move house or something and they can't keep the dog anymore. So we always take dog back. So we're a very dog orientated charity. And one of my responsibilities as a trustee, the veterinary trustee, is that I have to overlook, or oversee, that's a better word, isn't it? The veterinary welfare, the veterinary well-being of the dogs that come in. A lot of them come in with injuries. Spaniels are busy dogs, and so we get quite a few in that have chronic pain issues, which manifests itself in dogs like Cocker Spaniels as resource guarding. So any resource guarding dog, I normally look for pain first. There are some obvious dogs that come in with obvious lameness, changes in gait. Fosters always give me video. I have to speak to maybe up to 10 different veterinary practices a week because I have to liaise with the vets as to what they're doing and what they're spending our charity's money on in managing these dogs. I would say that 80% of the vets I deal with, when the foster takes them in and says, I think there's a problem with pain, 80% of vets, which is a fairly conservative estimate, reject that there's a pain problem there. And they'll start looking for something else. And they refuse to do pain trials. They refuse to think about imaging. So my way around that is basically to try and get the fosters or encourage the fosters to find a local physiotherapist to work with. And I found it quite shocking, to be honest, how many vets that I have to deal with from all different parts of Scotland, all different ages. So they're not all old folks, they're new graduates that just come in as well, who seem to have absolutely no understanding of pain whatsoever. And I find that really scary. A few of them are really, really good and they get it straight away. The majority of them basically just reject it out of hand. So it's a real dilemma to me, this. So one of the things that I've been doing to try and empower fosterers is talking to them and educating them on the idea of there being 4 dimensions of pain. There's the kind of pain which we would call intuition or the sixth sense, which is what the foster will be aware of because they form quite strong bonds with their dogs. And this is hugely important advice for anyone who owns a dog or is working with dogs. You certainly get to know your own dogs really, really well. You get to know all their little mannerisms. You get to know, you just have a gut feeling. If something's not quite right, you have a gut feeling by this tiny, tiny delay as the animal leaps out the basket when you come down that morning to give it breakfast, or the microsecond delay in enthusiasm when you bring the lead out and take them for a walk, that there's something not quite right. You can't put a finger on it. You couldn't name what it is, but you have a kind of sixth sense that's there. You as the owner or fosterer or caregiver would then take that dog to the vet and say, I don't know what's wrong, but something's just not quite right, but I've no idea what it is. The majority of vets will simply dismiss that as being nonsense. Now, what I'm trying to do is get our fosterers to educate our vets that there are 3 dimensions of pain. The first dimension is what they see in their knowledge about the dog. So they have the intimate knowledge of that dog's every day, every minute, if you like, movements and how they move around, how they negotiate, going for walks, coming in, interacting with the owner. That's their personal knowledge. The vet will never have that knowledge. When the vet examines the dog, they will have their clinical knowledge. So they'll have clinical examinations, poke, prod, no pain there, can't find anything there. They might take x-rays, they might do other things, imaging, maybe blood samples or something. All comes back perfectly normal. That's their knowledge. The problem is that there's very little crossover between those 2 levels of knowledge. It might be a little bit, but if you think of it as a Venn diagram, that's the kind of vet's clinical knowledge on one side. That's the owner's intuitive sixth sense knowledge, if you like, of the dog's everyday general behavior and well-being, if you like. On the Venn diagram, there's only a tiny little bit that actually crosses over in the middle there. And I think the difficult thing to get across is to get the veterinary staff. Nurses are much more amenable, by the way. They're much more open to these ideas. Is to get the
You know
vet
that's
to
been
accept.
scientifically supported as well. Gwen
There is,
Bradbury
I
did
know.
she did a study on that.
Yeah, I know. But the trouble is, it's still not something which is practiced. It's still not, these kind of fundamental errors. So fundamental bits of really useful knowledge never seem to get into the mainstream. And unfortunately, you get the kind of fairly arrogant vets that they think they know everything. They don't like being told what they ought to be looking at. The other side of the coin is they're new grads, and they overtrust their ability to find things, and maybe they're driven by practice policies. I don't know, but they don't have confidence necessarily in their own abilities, and so they tend to stick to the guns of just following the rules of the gold standard of what a clinical exam ought to be.
I think I'm going to defend the vets a little bit here. I think
Yes.
being in first opinion practice, we've got very different scenarios. You've got independent small practices, or
Not
you've
many of
got
those left.
corporates.
Mm.
There's not many of them left. And their time allowance is insane now. And
I
it
know.
isn't just the fact that you've got a 10 to 15-minute consult, it's the fact that you'll have a consultation block lasting 3 hours. So when you start running behind in one, it has one hell of a domino effect by the end of that 3 hours. And then you have got all the social pressures. You've got practice policies, so they have frameworks and protocols.
I know.
So it's extremely difficult to have your own mind. And if you're a new grad and you're surrounded by vets that have been in that practice 5, 10, 15 years. So I think I'm going to be a bit defensive because I just know what it's like. It's very hard to be a strong personality in those situations. I agree with you. I think things do need to change, but I think we need to work out how we can improve the environment for change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's the whole system is unfortunately
The system's
toxic and
flawed.
broken.
It
And
is.
I completely understand. I mean, I've been there. I've done that. I've done that thing where you've got 6 extra appointments crammed into a Monday morning, and you're meant to start operating at 11 o'clock because you've got a whole list of stuff to do there.
And then the
And
nurses gets really shitty with you when you're an hour and a
yeah,
half
I know.
late.
Yeah, it's that constant pressure, which is why I stopped doing it. I
Yeah.
just found it so unsatisfactory, and I do my heart bleeds for the vets, the young vets now. But nonetheless, they're not.
Yes.
I'm the defender of the dog here and the owner.
Mm.
And my concern is the welfare of our spaniels, as we're
Yes.
talking about that as the kind of the case study here. So I have to defend their well-being and the fosters' well-being. So my criticism of the vets, I take on board completely what you say. I agree completely, but nonetheless, it's still a toxic system, and
It
it's
is a
not
toxic.
working. It's not
Yeah.
working for the animal at the end of the day. And so it's the well-being and happiness of that dog which is paramount, and that is being failed miserably, as much as it's being failed in our human NHS system with lack of appointments and those sort of things. And the thing is, a lot of these things are really easy to fix. A simple pain trial can actually work wonders.
Go back to finish off your domains though, because I'm really loving the visual with this. So
All
you've
right,
got
okay,
a very,
right, okay.
very
So, all right,
mindly.
so circle one is basically the what the owner sees, what the caregiver sees. So that's her lens onto everything she sees as she or he as they interact with that particular dog. They've had the rescue dog in, or it's their own dog for 6 weeks. They've got to know the dog really well. They take the dog out for runs. They see how the dog moves. They've got used to the dog's routine. The time the dog wakes the owner up, goes up, and jumps on the bed for a lick. If there's any change in that routine, however small and subtle, the owner will pick it up almost invariably. If they're empathic owners and they care about the dog's welfare, which most of our people do, or they wouldn't be volunteers. Most caregivers do. I mean, I love my dogs to bits, and I notice anything like that which is slightly out of the ordinary, and I can feel it. It's not necessarily something I can put a finger on. I know something is not quite right because of a very subtle change in that dog's behaviour.
Mhm.
That is this dimension one. That's the knowledge that the owner has. Some of that knowledge, like, oh, the dog might be stiff when she gets up in the morning, that can be shared knowledge with the vet. So that we're going to dimension 2, which is the vet's knowledge. The vet's knowledge has no history of being with the dog, i.e. living with the dog. Their history is what they accumulate on the consult table. And if they're really lucky, they see that same dog more than once, because usually it's somebody else who sees it next, and all they have to go on is the history of what the previous vet has written down in the codes supplied by the computer. But that's neither here nor there. So the second domain or dimension is the vet's knowledge. So that's what they learn on clinical exam. It should also be what they learn from owner testimony, but that's not in that second dimension box. The second dimension is just clinical, the interaction of the vet with the owner. The middle box, the third domain, is when you bring the two Venn diagram circles together, there's a little crossover in the middle, a little area in there. That's the shared knowledge. So that knowledge would be the dog is a bit stiff when they get up in the morning, which the owner may convey to the vet. And then that is objective knowledge, which is relevant to the vet in history. Or the vet might see a slight change in gait. And the owners notice that as well, in perhaps being a little bit reluctant to jump into the car or something. So that's the kind of shared knowledge. But that shared knowledge is actually probably the most important, but it's the smallest part of the Venn diagram. And I think
So how can we improve that?
Well, that's the problem. And I think what I'm trying to work on is empowering our fosters to think in these terms of these 3 domains. I basically ask them to sign up with a physio, which they usually do via the practice. They get a recommendation from the practice. So at least we can get a physio looking at the dog as well. I speak to the vets as well, and that's that's where things really get fun, because they have this person they've never heard of asking to speak to them during a busy clinic. I'm not saying I have a solution to solve it, but what I'm saying is it is a tool for those open to thinking in terms of some kind of method of visualizing what's actually going on with the 3 domains, then that can percolate or filter into practice. As you say, Hannah, it's already developed as a kind of known unknown, if you like, within the medical professions, not just the vet profession, but the medical professions as well. And they have the same problem. I've worked with I've worked with neurologists and psychiatrists in a couple of meetings and conferences where the neurologists were trying to marry up what they do, the objective stuff, with what the psychiatrists were doing, which is all subjective. And the animosity between them is huge. In this day and age, it's absolutely ridiculous. And
I think you're right. I think it's a really common problem, be it in the medical sector or in the vet sector. And honesty,
not medicine and vets. This is neurology, medicine, and psychology or psychiatry.
All right, I'm talking because I've been doing that master's in chronic pain management for people. I think we have the same problem. And before my dad became very ill, he was seeing a number of specialists for his pain. Oh, they don't talk. They really don't talk. And it's very, very difficult, as you say, to get that person's story to the person that's willing to receive that story and work with it. I'm going to take a really cheeky opportunity to say a couple of CAM tools that are there to help with that middle of that Venn diagram. It has been a problem for a long time, and it will continue to be a problem for a long time. So in the member zone, guys, there is the OA booklet, which is designed like a vaccination card. It's got like a crib sheet type section. So you can go into every consultation and you can have almost a syllabus to go through. So if you keep seeing different vets, you get continuity, you get your expectations managed. We use the CAM branding to make it, this is important.
Which is, and I use the physiotherapist branding to legitimize what the fosters are saying.
So we spent a lot of money on the branding because we wanted this legitimate feel, and we wanted in the future for people to go, well, if CAM's given that, it's got to be valuable. So that's what we've been doing for like 10 years. There's also something called the prescription pad, and that's four A4 sheets. And again, it just gives you syllabus structure, but it also has it plants some things of what makes your dog happy is one of the things to talk about with your vet to kind of open up this emotional health of the dog. We're not just going to treat it with drugs. We're going to actually ask, what does that dog need to have a happy, content life? So there are a few tools there to help you on that middle Venn diagram. I would say, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, because the caregiver's going in and expecting a service, is it their responsibility to get the best out of that consultation, or is the service provider supposed to be making sure? I'm not sure because there's kind of like payment involved, but philosophically, it would be nice if both parties had the intention to get the best out of that 15 minutes. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is, and clearly, our dogs, our foster dogs, go in for a vet examination. That's one thing. They all go in for a vet examination to make sure they're physically fit. They have the teeth checked. It's quite surprising, just to the side, how many vets don't actually look in the dog's mouth, and it ends up with a real.
Oh,
They
interesting
sign.
to you. Mike Davies did a study at looking dogs over the age of 9. He assessed 43 dogs and he found 7 health complaints that hadn't been diagnosed in dogs over the age of 9. So they were fresh in, half an hour clinical examination, bloods, body weight, dental checks, 7 additional conditions.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me at all. Our dogs are the same. Which is why I will speak to the vets if I can initially, um, because I know things get missed. We have it all the time. I could give you a long list of sob stories of all the things, chronic pain conditions, chronic health problems that simply be missed because the vet involved has seen, oh, it's a charity dog, that's fine. It's just like signing it off. You just go through a checklist, sign it off. Yeah, that's fine. The dog's a bit reluctant to have her mouth opened. You don't want to get bitten. But
Okay, well, I'm gonna plant a seed for the audience, get a little bit of interaction here because I want to see what people's response to this scenario, this teeth scenario. It is common practice for a dog or a cat to not wish you to open their mouth and have a good examination in that 15-minute high stress situation. When I say to a caregiver, look, I would really like you to come back. We can try some external anxiolytics that you come in and hopefully your pet's going to be more chilled and we can get more out of this consultation. Or we could go the whole hog and let's do a sedation and do a full clinical exam. That means I can take a blood draw, we can have a really good look down the ears, everything. It would be interesting to see how many people go, yeah, I'd be fine with that. Because I would say the majority of clients I suggest it to hold back. They don't want it. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is, and that's one area where I will educate our fosters to do that. To do exactly that. If it isn't a dog that goes in and comes out with flying colours, clearly a young dog, no problems at all, that's fine. But the older ones, I always ask for more comprehensive exams.
Yeah.
Let's get the blood work done. Let's have the dog come in, trazodone maybe the night before, gabapentin or something if they're stressed. Sedate them, do what needs to be done, check them over. Yes, it costs more money, but that's fine because it saves you money and it certainly saves the dog's welfare in the long run. So
Yeah.
as a charity, we do that. So money's not the object. As a
That's
private
amazing.
owner, it's a different matter because they think sedatives are dangerous and
Yeah.
it's unnecessary, blah blah blah. And the dog goes home with a bloody great hole in its tooth,
I
and
think it
agony every
isn't
time it
just
eats.
I don't think it's just the money and I don't think it's just the fear. I think it almost falls into the taboo topic of like weight and stuff. People are they're a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that you
Yes.
think that their dog is not amenable to being handled. So
Mm.
I find some people take it a little bit of a personal insult when it really never is meant like that. It's quite a complex psychology, isn't it? Trying to work
Oh, it
out
is.
what is the obstacles.
Yeah, it is. There's never one answer. That's the thing because every scenario is different.
And that's why we need
That's
more
why it's such a
time.
difficult. That's why it's such a difficult nut to crack. You're dealing with so many different personalities, so many
Yeah,
different stressors of the vet. You have no idea what kind of day the vet's been having, what's going
no.
on at home, the kind of stresses they've had, the complaints they've had, the successes they've had. So the human psychology of the interaction is yet another thing which is really complicated.
Yeah, we've got loads of messages coming in, which I'm going to read in a minute. I'm going to throw another idea to people. I'm going to throw it to Robert, and you can go. That would never work, Hannah. But considering that we have definitely drifted into the American model, and we're
Yeah.
following the human model of these gigantic referral centres. So the drift is into multi-vet practices that have radiography, CT scanning, laparoscopy, everything's on site. And you see them everywhere now. They're all purpose-built buildings. Everywhere's scrubs. Everybody looks like they work for the same team. That's all I'm going to say. But with that comes gigantic overheads. And we know that the cost of a consult now is 55, £60 in many parts of the country for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But they've got a ridiculous amount of overheads. So would there ever be place in the future for us to go back to having, okay, these mega hospitals, but we have these beautiful satellite, small, low key, haven't got all the, the gubbins. They're a consult room. They've got basic goods, but they've got time because they've got less overheads. And I just wonder if that's a vision for the future, whether that could serve, because most consultations don't lead into a CT scan. Most
No.
consultations need time, don't they?
Yeah.
Don't know. What do you
Interesting.
think?
There is it's something that's happening already with this move away from the gold standard,
Oh, yeah.
BSAVA and the BVA, moving away from this idea of gold standard. You have to do all the blood tests. You throw the book at the animal and do all of this stuff. The idea of gold standard comes from human medicine, and it has no place in veterinary medicine at all because gold standard is based on loads and loads of meta-analyses, systematic reviews of thousands and thousands and thousands of studies on millions of patients that have been done over the decades. Um, there is a move now to try and counteract the costs of veterinary care. This is long before the CMA got involved with pricing. This goes back 10 years. They've been talking about trying to move back to the old days of pragmatic veterinary medicine, where you build a relationship with a client, exactly as you say, an uncluttered, low-tech consult room, if you like, where what you've got is the animal, you've got the caregiver, the owner, and you've got the veterinarian. They build a relationship. The veterinarian basically goes by experience, again, which is another problem because there's so many new grads coming in, but they will get there. And they almost use their own clinical intuition, which is how it
Mm.
was when I started veterinary medicine, where you go in and you take the owner of the dog on a journey. You never do everything all at once. Everything is a step, a mutually consensual step-by-step approach. We could try this, we could try that. Maybe that's going on. Let's try this and then come back in a couple of days and see how the dog's doing. That kind of approach, that is now being promoted. If you go to BSAVA this year, you'll find there are lectures on this now.
Can I be really cheeky?
Mm.
I'm just gonna, I can't believe I'm gonna do this because it's so rude. I did a lecture about contextual care last year at BVA Live
Ah,
because
yeah. Well, there you
yeah,
go then. There it is.
it's it's something that me and you did 20 years ago.
Yeah, it
This
is.
is not new. This is
No,
called
no.
surviving in first opinion practice. When we
Yeah,
weren't fear of litigation, we weren't in fear
yeah,
of what our colleagues were going to say. We weren't in fear of what our bosses wanted us to do. When I qualified 23 years ago, we did contextual care.
yes. All this corporate um, practice of gold standard has come around because of the corporization of the profession. It was never in small independent practices.
Mm, mm.
It's
No,
something which started to emerge in about 2005 because practice I was working at the time started having people in from America looking at this and using computerized systems which give you lists of things you need to be doing and all the tests you need to be doing, and the animal needs vaccination and worming and all these things because that's gold standard. That's when it started to leak into the veterinary profession. And funnily enough, that more or less coincided with when I quit.
Just so you all
Surprise,
know,
surprise.
it's very funny because even though I only met Robert for a year ago now, a couple of years maybe, he used to work at a practice that I did locuming at, which is so spooky. I'm loving people's messages in the chat, and I'm actually glad that Dee, which I
I
imagine
was
is
a partner in
Deb's,
that practice.
you were a partner in the practice with Andrew
Partner, yes,
Ash.
yes,
I
yes, yes.
think he's got a super yacht, Robert. I don't know what happened to you.
Well, I took my own part.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't do it for the money.
I did it for the money. I did it for the money.
No.
I love what Deb said about the grooming clients because I think that in the grooming world, you have more access to the first opinion client than even
Yes,
the first
yes,
opinion vets
yes.
because you see the people that really, oh God, I'm going to sound, they look at their dog on the outside
Yeah,
quite dutifully, don't they? And how they appear
yes,
and what they look like.
yes.
And they may not necessarily see the need for the internals to be correct. I'm not saying it in the right way. I'm trying to not bluntly say some people that have dogs and cats and they're looking at the aesthetics rather than looking at the health. But I like the way that you did say it can be very difficult to persuade them to go into the vets and have things looked at because that is a truth, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I can't see the queue and I can't see the questions.
Oh, you need
I
to
don't
just go
think I
down to
make
the bottom and you can get
no.
chat up.
Where is
So
it? Where
let's
is
now
Oh, oh, there
talk.
it is. Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's kind of like I had long conversations about the politics of the world and how the world is about to blow up
Yeah.
today. So I want to be happy. Let's talk happy
Yeah. All
stuff.
right.
Let's talk about this happiness, emotional well-being, because I'm going to take the lead from a conversation I had with the lovely Laura, who's in the background here.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a real, as the professional, as the veterinary professional, we tend to focus very much on the physical health of the individual in the context that we see them, in the expectation placed upon us. And a conversation that doesn't come up in the consult room enough is how is your dog's happiness? Are they content? Are they enjoying life? And we can get lost in doing more drugs and more tests, um, and forget about what their animal's journey is. How do you feel about that?
You will know well, Anna, that basically we were brought up as veterinarians talking about welfare in animals. The important thing, all emotional well-being was encapsulated in this thing called welfare. And then we had the five freedoms, we had the five domain models, all those sort of things, which basically meant that animals were getting fed, they were being kept warm, they had food to eat. It was all the basic stuff. And my argument is that that completely misses the trick, because if you're a doctor, you're brought up in the world where welfare is something which defines the absolute minimum standard for your for a living. It's welfare is something that the government gives you when you haven't got enough money, when you haven't got a house, you get welfare benefits. And it's to make sure you've got enough to eat, it's to make sure that you've got enough pounds to put in your coin meter and so on. It's the lower end of what well-being and happiness is. As
Mm,
vets, as people working in the animal industry, our well-being or happiness rules that we are taught at college, and we certainly have applied if you're working in the animal industry, in the farming industry, for example, or lab animals. The basic standard there is what we call welfare, and that misses out completely all the research that's done to develop or decide what good welfare is in an animal. There's no relationship at all to the kind of research that's done to define what welfare is in humans. So
mm,
we don't recognize this. Nobody seems to have noticed. This seems to have just passed under the carpet with nobody actually seeing the difference. But there's a huge difference to how human healthcare and mental wellness professionals think about welfare in humans, which encompasses well-being, happiness, all those things, you need to have a life worth living. And how it's defined within the animal industry, governed by welfare laws, like the five freedoms, etc. So there's this huge gulf between the two.
But do you not think that's because there's still the burden of animals don't have emotions? Because the five freedoms came
Yes,
out in the 1960s, didn't they?
1980s.
Oh, was it
So
1980s?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, the basic standards of welfare was 1987. It was UFAW, wasn't it? Universities
Who
Federation
did
for Animal Welfare.
who was the one that began with B? That's
Um,
really helpful, isn't it? Who
yeah,
was
they're
the
really,
person
really.
that began with B in the
Um,
1960s?
there's Timothy, is it Timothy Birch? Jonathan Birch. He was
I'll
late in the
find it out and
60s.
I'll email you later. But anyway,
Yeah,
1987.
the 87 was the Federation of Animal Welfare Council. That was theirs, and then there were things like five domains and those sort of things added to that later.
Okay, I
But
know
they
where
were,
I'm getting confused. The five welfare, I thought it was about health of farming animals, and it was by Beaton or somebody like that that was
oh,
trying
there
to,
might be one that goes back
yeah,
donkey's years. Yeah,
yeah.
that goes back to the 70s or something. That was the original foundation of having enough food, having enough water, having
That's it,
something,
yeah.
warmth. All
Bramble!
they're,
Well done, Sophie.
yeah, they're all. Oh, thank you. Yeah, they're all basically focused on production.
Yeah.
And what's happened is that those standards are still applied for all animals now,
Mm.
and they're worlds apart from how welfare, or at least how well-being, is measured in humans, which are done by these massive world surveys by the World Health Organization, um, loads of other organizations which do it by questionnaire. And what are questionnaires? They're verbal report. You ask people how they're feeling on the scale of 1 to 5. Where would you say you are in your life now? Miserable, feeling suicidal, or are you happy? You feel content with life? Is your life worth living? And in the presentation I did for Pet Remedy, you saw I put a whole lot of graphs from that data in there, which shows you what the trajectory is. We have no data for animals at all, except for some
No.
primates and zoos. Absolutely nothing.
That was
Research has never ever
fascinating.
been done. Yeah, no, never
Yeah.
been done in animals.
No,
So
no,
there's a whole.
please tell them about that actually, Robert, because that I listened to your lecture about 3 times. If anybody gets the
Yeah,
chance, it was Pet Remedy. Andrew Hale put on a conference called Emotional Wellbeing in Animals. It's 2 days. I think you can get it on record. I'm still listening to the recordings
yeah, you
myself.
can for 6 months.
Yeah, and yours was the first on the Saturday, and I have listened to it 3 times.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you're sorry for punishment.
Adapted hedonics, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the hedonic adaptation is where
That's it.
yeah, which is where you can never be happy all the time, which makes complete sense because you always go back down to a base level. You win the lottery, you feel like absolutely ecstatic. You can't carry on feeling ecstatic for the next year. Um, it'll always go back down to a kind of base level of what it was before, which seems to be
Yeah.
one of the motivations why rich people just have to keep getting richer. They're never
Hmm.
satisfied. They never have enough money.
So tell them about the
Um,
primate study, because as you say, humans have the amazing ability to verbalize or at least kind of document their true experience as it
Yeah,
is to
well,
them.
no animal can read, write, or speak.
Mm.
That's the thing. So they can't actually subjectively explain how they feel. So you can't do on a scale 1 to 5, how do you feel? But in the study in primates, what happened is they basically interviewed zookeepers who know their animals quite well. They formed quite good relationships with them, and they basically did the study in lots of independent zoos all around the world, on different groups of primates. I think they used 2 different species. And what they found is exactly the same thing that they found in humans, where our trajectory of happiness starts off that you're really, really happy and have a sense of well-being early on in life, i.e., before you're a teenager. So remember those years where everything was long summers and holidays, and you
I
had nice
miss
home
them.
life, etc. Most people, yeah, I did too. But then you get to the sort of late teenage years, you probably start thinking about responsibilities and having to get jobs, and your sense of well-being, not welfare, well-being goes down. And then you have a kind of, it goes up a little bit again when you're 30, 35. It then takes another plummet which is the midlife crisis. So if ever any of you have had your midlife crisis yet, that's what that is. And after that, it then starts to go up again. So when you start going to 50s, 60s, 70s, you then start to feel really happy and content with your life again. So there's this funny U-shaped curve that dips like that. They found exactly the same thing with these monkeys in the zoos. The trajectory plotted by the zookeepers who are doing this independently and just plotting the lifetime of how they felt their animals were. So they knew if their animals were a bit grumpy one day or much more open with them or more playful or something. The accumulation of all those scores showed that the curves for these monkeys was exactly the same. Lots and
Wow.
lots of joy and happiness early in life, dip down when they're adolescents, a bit more dip down, bit of an up, midlife crisis, they feel shitty, and then it starts to go up when they get older, and then they die. So the question is, does this happen with other animals as well? You know, dogs are adolescent at 18 months or something. Do they have the same kind of roller coaster? And then they get to a point when they're approaching seniors where, setting aside things like chronic arthritis, etc., they set into a routine where they're actually pretty content with life. So you feed
Yeah.
these dogs plodding along with the old owner in front. We will often judge those dogs as being perhaps quite happy and dull and not very happy, but they're probably actually quite content with life. If you ask them how they're feeling and how happy they are, they'd probably say, actually, I'm quite content. I've had
But
all my
that's
shitty years out the way.
subjective, isn't it? Because you could,
It is,
God, that's tricky.
it
Because
is, but we don't know, you see, the research has never been done. And it's just one
no,
of those studies.
I must admit, when I'm driving along and I see somebody walking their dog and the dog is lagging behind, so the lead is
Yeah,
not in front, it's not the side, and it's behind. Less inclined to think that dog's content with life.
me too. Me too. They're
Yeah,
sort of dragging along like
yeah,
an old person, an old dog. Maybe that dog is actually quite content, but it's just that's the way they show their contentment. But we don't know. We've never done the work.
no.
And
Well,
I
staying
find
on
that
the,
absolutely fascinating.
I find it fascinating. I'm going to give people a little bit of a secret, and then we're going to play it in the world of emotional well-being and how we can achieve it. And then I'm going to answer, would you recommend using behavior indicators in a minute? So when Cam was launching back in around about 2015, I really struggled with thinking whether it was necessary because of the problems of the five welfares, the five domains. And I knew that I was going to get a huge amount of pushback from vets and from owners saying, well, they've got a bed, they've got a house, they've got food. What more do they want? And when you look at the problems that we've got in the world and the suffering in the welfare situations with animals in shelter, animals in war-torn zones, declining populations of endangered species, there's me going, oh, but they might not be happy in their house. And I found it really difficult for a long time because I felt that I didn't have a good enough argument to shout about it. So that's why we started off as a Facebook page and I put stories online, case studies, and I wanted to see what the reception of the public was about these house modifications, improving quality of life, tending to pain, etc. And it was the audience that drove Cam. If it hadn't had such an amazing feedback from the Facebook page, the website would have never have been built and it would never be where we are now. But I'm trying to say that even now, I know that there's certain times when I'm locuming and I'll be in the wrong tribe at work. And if I start talking about the emotional well-being, in addition to the pharmaceuticals, in addition to the nutrition, in addition to the x-rays, in addition to, I know that people are like, Jesus Christ, Hannah, for God's sake, you've got pain relief on board, you've given them lifestyle advice, you're getting the weight off. What more do you want? And it's kind of quite difficult to pitch it when you're in such a high stress environment in a vet practice, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. But then that doesn't mean we shouldn't be striving to achieve that.
No.
It's not us having to do the work. It's the caregiver of the animal. It's the animal's owner, and
Yeah.
those owners have those animals. Unlike having a cow down the bottom of the garden where you just get the milk from it, or a pig that you raise and then you kill it and have it for Christmas. Um, Dog owners, cat owners have relationships with their pets, and the same as
Yes.
the relationships that they have with their own children most of
And
the
do you know
time.
the sentence, and I'm going to say thank you to Laura who sparked this one off. blinking Laura. She's got imposter syndrome. She doesn't think she's that good, but she's amazing. She has been working in NHS physiotherapy now, much more focused on like pediatrics. And
Yeah.
she once said to me, no child ever chooses to have a disability. And I was like, oh, that's potent. But modifying it, no dog ever chooses to be with you in your house, in your
No,
life. You've
no,
invited them. And it's our duty of care to make sure that it is the best life that they can have whilst they're in our
yeah,
care. And if that
I completely
means,
agree.
yeah, and that means that you have to think about your flooring because you keep seeing them slipping and you can keep
Yeah.
seeing them getting a little bit tentative. If you have to think about your routine, that's my personal feeling, but there are many people that would shout me down. Probably not in this
Mm,
audience because you're all biased. 'Cause that's why you're
yeah.
here.
Well, the thing is, you tend to attract people who feel the same way as you do,
Yeah,
and that's not unusual. You're not going to get through to everybody. But for my money, if I can persuade 7 out of 10 dog owners that they're actually doing the right thing, and if it's right for them, they don't have to feel guilty. We wouldn't do that with people, would we?
no,
It goes back to my argument that the standards for humans is beyond welfare; it's towards well-being.
yeah,
And social services do what they can to provide welfare, i.e., a roof over your head, benefit money so you can just about feed yourself. Um, I'm not going to go into the social problems within the welfare system, but the fact is, what the welfare system would like to do, what it strives to do, and certainly what they do in the charity sector, is to try and um, bring as much in the way of well-being and happiness to those people as well.
So how do we
If
do
that makes
it?
sense.
Because we've talked a lot about it being a problem. It's not on the forefront of everybody's mind in first opinion services and referral services, I won't lie. Um, how do we start to bring this into general vet care, etc.? How what can we do?
My route is to explain the elephant in the room, which is this idea that we have different standards for people than we do for non-human animals. It's as simple as that. We've kind of missed that thing completely. So if you're and we're using the terminology is incorrect, and that was the point behind that PowerPoint I did at the pet remedy thing, is just really to try and add some science to bridge that gap between the two.
Yeah.
Because most most caregivers, certainly the ones that listen to people like us, Anna, anyone who disagreed with us just wouldn't be in the room, would they?
They've left.
And of course all the audience there as well. Most of them basically want the best, but all of them want the best for their pets, which is why they're here, which is why they come and listen to these kind of things. And most of the people I know, go back to our fosterers and Springer Rescue. They love dogs, which is why they sacrifice a lot of their time and effort where they could be going off on holiday and doing all sorts of other things. They want to take dogs that are in need in and help them,
Yeah.
and that's great. And then move them on to families that love them. So it's often families which they had a great deal of difficulty in, and move them
Yeah.
on to families that really appreciated them. I think what's missing is the element of education in them understanding this difference between well-being, welfare, and what well-being and happiness is, because they're not the same things. And exactly, you're,
No.
you're sort of hitting the nail on the head. Even within vet practice, you get criticised because the dogs have welfare, they've got everything they need. What more do you want with all the ills in the world? That's not the dog's fault. And as
No.
you rightly say, Anna, it's the thing is we have a special responsibility for the dogs because we're the ones that took them in the first place.
Yeah.
And therefore we have a duty of care, which most caregivers or dog owners will have.
Yeah, and I have got a little bit of a solution. I'm quite proud of what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
I hope it's going to go down well. I know from the last 10, 15 years that I've been obsessed about chronic pain. It is not everybody's cup of tea. There's many practices that I work in. They go, oh, that's nice. What do you do? Dispense gabapentin? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I've spent 10 years learning to do. So there are people that it just doesn't
Yeah.
resonate with. And because I know that I've, say, worked in 50 practices around the UK, there's about, I think, 8,000. This is going to
Mm.
resonate for all of them. I can't expect practices to change and start trying to fit in a discussion about emotional welfare within their 15-minute, really
No.
time deprived consultation. That's why we created the member zone, is
Yeah.
because what I really want practices to do is, as you say, know the difference between welfare and well-being. For them to say in a consultation, right, I've got a defined amount of time. We've talked about your dog's pain relief. We've talked about using some objective monitoring, which I'm comfortable with because that's the way that my brain works. We've done a blood sample, done a urine sample. I'm happy my end, but I know that you might like more. So I'd like you to go to your canine arthritis management. They've got a lovely member zone, and that is where you kind of explore advice, tips, hints, and all the other aspects that comes to the arduous, quite emotional task of looking after a dog with a disability that's never going to go away. It's going to get worse, sadly. So that's kind of like where we're at, because I don't think I can see what was happening in the vet sector. It's going to change anytime soon.
Not as the way, not the way it is with the crisis of attrition, stress, mental health problems now among vets, the pressure they're constantly under, this flow of new graduates coming in. I
Yeah.
know that feeling, but I never had that kind of pressure because the kind of practices I went into were actually fairly small. Well,
Yeah.
they're all small, they're no corporates, and they kind of nursed you through, which is really nice. It
Yeah,
certainly didn't
I
have
would
the
say,
pressures of
just again, just defending, because I'm always going to play devil's advocate because I sit on so many fences. I have worked also at some practices that have been terrible independents, and the
me too. Yeah,
corporate equivalent that have graduate academies and mentorship programs, and for some can be better. I don't think we can lump corporate bad, independent good.
no,
I
no, no,
think
no.
they swim between the sea. I'm going to throw some questions at you before we come to an end. So Sophie, I love Sophie. She's making loads of lovely comments here. I think we're moving towards well-being with animals as well, but I feel that many stakeholders still really prioritize physical health and emotional and see emotional and mental health as cherry on the top rather than essential. Would love to understand how to move people towards seeing them at least equally. When you find it, Sophie, you can jump on board and have a chat and teach me and Robert.
Yeah, it should be the other way around because you can't have good welfare, however well you're fed and everything else you are, if your mental well-being isn't there.
No.
And we know that from human studies. It's one of the things that's so well studied in humans that if your well-being is poor, i.e., you're not happy, i.e., you're a bit anxious or worried about paying the mortgage, all those things will compromise your welfare, the
Yeah.
the 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 basic standards. And it's exactly the same with animal studies that have been done as well. You can
Yeah.
see it. It's very, chronic malstress is a
Well,
study technique in rats.
but you can't separate your emotional state from your physical state, can you? They
No,
are
they're
heavily
they're two. They're
intertwined.
one and the same thing. They're one and the
So
same
look,
thing.
Laura says, I strongly feel that my responsibility isn't just about meeting my dog's needs, including arthritic needs, of course. It's about try my best to give her a happy, fulfilled, enriched life. It's hard, though, to really try and see beyond not just what I think makes her happy, but truly trying to see what she is telling me makes her happy. I feel if I can do my best with that, then I've done my best by her. I
Yeah,
totally
I
agree, Laura.
completely agree. It's your intuition.
Yeah,
Intuition, this sixth sense you have because you know your dog so well and you know the buttons, if you like, that you push, which float her boat. It's you there's I've always been a spaniel person. I know the kind of things that spaniel dogs like. They don't like walking along on leads. They don't like walking in straight lines. They
no,
move
they
like that off
don't.
lead. Sniff, sniff, sniff. Da, 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 da. That's 100 miles an hour all the time. So you know your dog, like you would know your children. It's the same kind of relationship. You're on the right track if they're what sort of appear to be living fulfilled lives. That sounds like a lot of ambiguous waffle, but I'm sure the questioner, I can't remember her name, would understand what I'm
Laura.
talking about there. Yeah, she's absolutely right. She will be doing all the right things.
Well, what I
Her
want to
dog
add
has
to
her
that
well
is,
trained.
yeah, what I want to add to that is because having been through the long journey with chronic pain. I think I nursed Holly for 4 years, 3, 4 years. It is so painful emotionally to the
Yeah, it
caregiver
is.
looking after your dog, never feeling good enough, never feeling
Mm.
you're getting it right, always thinking that there's something else that you should have found or done. And it can be psychologically really screw you up if you've got a mind
Oh, it
like me,
is.
where you're always
Yeah,
trying.
caregiver. Yeah, the
Yeah.
sleepless nights, the worry in the morning when you get up, that slight sicky feeling
Yeah. So
when your dog
trying
doesn't
to
leap
have
out the bed to
something
say
that,
hi. Yeah,
yeah, and trying to
I
have
know.
something that you
I
can
know.
anchor on, which is I know when I can see happiness in my dog. I know when I can
Mm.
see joy. I can know when I can
Yes.
see that they're content. That is what I'm aspiring for. And I'm
Yes.
somebody told me to do that many years ago, and it gave me just a break from the demons that I kept having going,
Yeah,
you're not
it
good
is.
enough, you're not trying hard enough. So
No.
look for the happiness, look for that
Yeah.
contentment, and you cling on to it, enjoy it.
Yeah.
I've got
Just
another one from
trust in your
Sophie.
intuitions.
Exactly. Would you recommend using behavioral indicators of emotion and states to assess animal welfare to the animal's perception of their own? Start again. Would you recommend using behavioral indicators of emotion and states to assess animal welfare to the animal's perception of their own experiences and lifetime experiences? Do you want me to
So-
read that to you
Sorry,
again?
it's not very good English. Sorry, I think I
Mm.
typed too quickly. I think I was just I've had conversations with people where they very much would prioritize, like, say, a physical lesion, and sort of saying, like, in that 5 domains model, look, those 4 physical domains lead into the mental domain. Therefore, we can use that physical lesion or indicator as a proxy indicator. And I thought that and said, no, we can't. We need to, like, have some direct measures. So I was kind of in, and then what I have suggested from that would be behavioral indicators of, like, emotion or, like, longer term mood states or something. So I was just interested in, like, if that's where you would go, or if you would go anywhere different to try and have that assessment of, like, what you're calling well-being as opposed to welfare, I suppose. But I wrote that really
Yeah.
badly, I think.
No, I see where you're coming from. You need to be really careful with starting to use behavior measures, because that's where animal behavior, this whole idea of sort of the ABA movement, where all you think about is what the animal does, takes us back to Watson and Skinner. It's I think it's knowing the personality of your particular dog is really important. If you've had them for a long time, that the little ways they have, what they get up to, when they want to play with you, when they want to sleep, when they're enthusiastic to go out for a walk. All those little things are useful behavior indicators. They are behavior. They're quite subtle. They're not things that you would necessarily write down as something that you could score on a sheet. It's where the sort of intuition comes in. I think those trump trying to use standard physical indicators of behavior, if that makes sense. It's you can't, because when you see an animal do something, a dog do something, it's going to mean one thing for one dog and something else for a completely different kind of dog, depending on the breed, depending on the things they like, the things they dislike, what their life's experiences are, etc. So the interpretation of what you see is not something you can write down. I saw this behavior. This dog did that and put his nose to the ground and did that, because that could mean different things for different dogs, or it could mean different things for the same dog in different contexts.
Yeah. I
So
probably could add to that. Like Luna's a border collie,
yeah,
and Luna is got that compulsive nature to bring sticks to you and stones, and you're like,
yes,
but I would be able to tell whether she's doing it because she's really like excited and happy about it, or whether she's just going through the motions because it's a behavioral trait. Very.
yeah,
Is that a good
and
example?
she might be frustrated, but you would know that from the context.
Yeah,
It
I'd,
might
I'd,
be,
I'd like to say. I hope so.
yeah. Well, I think you would, because it depends what you're doing. If you're interacting with her with that, and she's got that little sparkle, and she's got that relaxed face,
Yeah.
and ears a little bit forwards, all those sort of things. There are just these very subtle micro changes in behavior that you see, which as a package, you need a kind of video almost to see it. There's been some interesting work done with I think it was Clive Wynne published something fairly recently that showed how important it was not to take images out of context, not to look at an image and try and assess how the dog feels in it. You've got to take the whole context, which is something we've known for years. But it's a new study published by an undergraduate of his, which demonstrates this very clearly.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly good study, but it just reminds me of it, where you have to take the whole context. So you need to look at the whole video, if you like, of what you see. And it needs to be somebody who knows that particular dog looking at that video to be able to make that judgment. Because somebody
Yeah.
else may see it in a different kind of dog, and it may mean something completely different.
I'm just giggling to myself because you said that the whole package, and I love that. But I can just imagine a vet on the other side of the table with a client going again. There's just something not quite right with the package. Yes, he's still
Yeah.
doing that. No, he still does.
Well,
Yep. No, he still does
yeah.
that. Nope, he's still
Yeah.
doing that.
Well,
We're like,
this is my first dimension of the three-dimension model then. And the vet needs to understand they're never going to understand those things. They simply have to take the caregiver's word for it.
yeah,
So that is like a proxy for the dog's verbal report.
yeah,
So the caregiver's acting as the voice, as the verbal report for their own animal. And that
yeah.
is what the vets don't take on board.
No, really difficult. I've got another one from the amazing Beata. I'm going to get it wrong. You can actually pop your video on and say it because I'm going to say the name wrong. How do I say it? Beata?
Hi, it's Beata actually.
Beata.
Yes,
Beata, yeah.
I know lots of Beatas. Polish name.
Well, read
No
your one
German
because it's
name.
brilliant.
Oh,
It's
German.
brilliant. Do please read your comment because I think it's lovely.
See whether, yes, there's my comment. I said that I'm not sure that we can always rely on owner intuition to spot if something is wrong. I find that some people can ignore changes in their dogs because they're in denial about what the dog is telling them. Not every owner can read their dogs accurately, and many dogs are quite good at hiding their pain, especially I find if it's chronic pain. They're being quite stoic. And the joint that gets licked is explained away by just a minor graze, or it was a knock, or an insect sting, or whatever. And the slow, stiff walk is seen as a sign of the dog being tired after yesterday's beach walk. And the frequent stops on a walk that the dog uses to sniff are not seen as expressing a need for a rest, but just for reading their P-mail, as I like to call it, etc. So my question is rather, how can we educate people more to read their dogs correctly, or at least as well as possible? It's not as so easy, I think, to assume that dog owners, just because they think they know their dogs or have been with the dog for a long time, can actually accurately identify pain or chronic pain.
Yeah, Beata, you highlight a very common problem in the behavior world. And this is the idea that you can read body language and you can tell everything from body language. And that is exactly what I'm not saying. It's not that objective. What the information that we're after is the information in the gaps of all that. Does that make sense? So it's the little subtle bits and pieces
Between body language and what?
between an owner's intuition. If the owners will try and overinterpret, that's for sure, and they'll go online and they'll look at articles online or hear a trainer speaking in a social media post that you can tell, if your dog does this, this is what your dog's thinking. It's never that clear cut. And therefore, what you're looking for are the reliable kind of caregivers or owners, are the owners who have really quite a strong connection with their dog, if that makes sense. They're the ones that really do understand their dog and they're not standing there judging it and over-interpreting it. But they have I'm sure you have it with your dogs, and I certainly have it with mine, where you have an intuition of when they're feeling well and when they're happy and when something's not quite right. And this is where it comes down to this first dimension I described of the owner taking the dog to the vet and saying there's something not quite right, but I can't put a finger on it.
I think
I
I know where
agree.
Beata's coming from this, though.
Yes.
I think that when you're talking about caregivers that maybe haven't got the connection to know,
Yes.
they haven't got
Yes.
the time, they've got busy lives, they've got kids, they've got their
Yes.
senile grandma living with them, they've got financial
Yeah.
worries, they just have no capacity, or they don't want to have capacity.
Or they've
But
lost it because they're too stressed in their own lives now.
they're just too stressed, but they still go to the dog trainer and expect the dog trainer to
Yes.
fix the problem. Or they go to the vet and they expect the vet to just make everything okay. But they don't have the ability to fill the gaps, and it's really hard to
Yes.
work with them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I come across them all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to just tell Beata a little story and see how she. I'm not going to give you sleepless nights, but this is one of the things that go through my head all the time. So Cam's been running since 2015 and ruined my life, basically, but that's another story. I go to a conference last November, and somebody that I was involved with in 2015, starting up kind of like the whole project, quite happily said to me, well, let's face it, Hannah, nothing's really changed in the last 10 years. We haven't really made any difference at all. Now, bear in mind that his business has soared and he's selling a fortune. He's traveling the world. He's got houses in every country now, blah, blah, blah. It has changed for him. So I took it very personally. I was like, so you've basically said everything that I've done with Cam has made no difference at all. And I fumed about it for months. I proper fumed. I even sent him a voice message and then had to delete it the next morning because I thought, no, that's possibly a bit much. Anyway, I get to speak to him a few months later and I say, you know, you really pissed me off. I was really angry and really upset that 10 years, you basically told me I've wasted 10 years. And then giving him a little bit of more room to speak, he said, well, your audience is changing, but we're not touching 60% of owned pets. At least 60%. They might not go to the vets. They might pop into Pets at Home, buy a cheap toy, buy some quick food. They might be lucky if they get a bag of food from Lidl. They're owned, they're loved, not how we might love, but we haven't touched that group of people.
No.
And that's what I sit there thinking, right, if I really did say I wanted to change the way that we see and manage chronic pain, how do I hit that 60%? How do I change the way? They're not going to have instinct like Robert's
You
talking
can't.
about. They haven't got time. It's not in
You
their
can't.
priority level.
Or even if they had time, they'd rather go and do something else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that
and
doesn't
I
mean that
know
that dog's
that
lived
exists.
experience isn't the same. And how do I
No,
change that?
no.
And maybe I haven't given up yet. I might give up when I'm in my 80s. I haven't thought of how I'm going to fix it. But there is a potential I will have to give up because I can't access them. And I think that's who you're talking about, Beata. Those people that you just can't
Yeah, it's
access.
true.
Yes,
It's true. And
absolutely. You just have
I
to
like
look
this
at
idea.
yeah, sorry. You just have to look
Yeah.
at the number of dogs that are overweight or obese. Oh, the
Yes,
dog loves a
I
treat
completely
and
agree.
stuff, you know, and that's not love, and that's not spotting what they are doing. So I think Hannah is right. We're
Yeah.
preaching to the saved here
Yes. Well,
among our
I
members
this
on our forum here, aren't we?
I
Sophie's
used to
got her
be.
hand up. She's the first person to use the hand.
Yeah, I'm going to put something in really quickly there.
Yeah.
I learned very early on. I used to get really concerned and worried about the number of animals that were out there suffering in silence, the ones that were unreachable. And I then came to the conclusion that you're actually much better working within your sphere of influence rather than outside with your fear of concern. So the sphere of influence are the people that we speak to and actually listen, and we can make a difference. Outside of that is your 60%, Hannah, which is your field of concern that worries you, but you can't touch them, you can't do anything about them. Fact is, you can't do
you're
anything about
not.
them.
I'm going to start rapping and dancing on TikTok if I need to. So you haven't pushed me yet. There is possibility I will reach the
Yeah,
60.
you might scratch the surface, but then they will die, their dogs will die, and there'll be new generations coming along.
Yeah, it's true.
Who's the person with a hand up?
Sophie.
Thanks, Hannah. I think you kind of like spoke to a lot of it after Beata's question, but it links to what I was saying about behavioural indicators. And I was just really interested in kind of like referring to Skinner and stuff, because when I guess what I was meaning, and I won't be good at picking canine behavioural indicators, but I guess if I picked equine ones, I'd say like triangulation of the eye or tension in the muzzle, or it would be quite focal things that I would say on their own they might mean, you know, pain or anxiety, or, you know, they might mean a number of things, but if you piece them together, you might be able to get a sense of that animal's well-being, how that animal's perception is of their situation in that moment, and that's what I was meaning, and that's what I've been kind of like trying to use to advocate some understanding beyond, say, like a really obvious physical ailment, in terms of like trying to understand that. And so I kind of like wanted to come back, because to me they link together. To me, like, if people have some objective things to look at and be able to assess, so like coming to like the artist thing of, if people don't have that intuition there to sense that that animal's not right, like some of these that are really observable kind of things, and once you might not notice them if you don't know to look for them, but once you do know to look for them. So I'm going to be really rubbish and pick like probably a really obvious dog one now, because I don't feel so confident with dogs, but I don't know, like maybe like licking their lip or head turn away for like anxiety, and maybe that maps onto like other canine things as well. But like, so why not, like, because I'm not familiar enough with Robert, with your reasons for saying like not to use them, and I get that there's certain, there's only certain number of muscle patterns and they might map onto multiple different things, but if you know multiple indicators and you put them together, can that not give us a good indication of how that animal is experiencing like that situation, that moment? And if not, and if we can't rely on intuition for all the reasons that have just been discussed, like what else have we got, is my question, I guess.
I agree with you completely, Sophie. I didn't say that I don't use a baseline for those things. Certainly things like Sophie Lind, what's her name? Somebody Shepherd. I know the lady, but her second
Oh,
name is
yes.
Shepherd.
Yes.
Regression, all those things, those kind of basic stance, like turning away, rolling over, ears back, tail down, whites of eyes, all those things are useful indicators, but they need to be taken in context. And my criticism was people that use those as a standard, and they say, right, I've seen this in my dog, therefore my dog must be feeling that. It has to be taken in context, and also in context of the dog's repertoire of behaviors, if you like, their own little habits. So I do agree with you.
I think a solution is, I think that we should bring animal studies and behaviour into primary school, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote about that about 10 years ago.
Did you?
It needs to start in primary school.
I think the 3 R's, get rid of them, whatever they were, and it's got to be animal kind of like studies, awareness, etc. Finances and posture. I think we need them in our life. I think it will take the pressure off the NHS.
Well, they need school pets. They need pets.
Yeah.
There needs to be a place. There need to be pets in the classroom all the time.
Yeah,
So the
they
kids
did.
are
I remember
handed
that.
guinea pigs and rabbits and rats and mice and all those sort of things.
Yeah. Right, on that note, because it is coming up to 9:30, gin and tonic time, I'd love to say thank you so much, Robert, for coming. It's been really good. It's been a really good interactive one. It's been the most interactive one we've had. I love the fact that my Alison Lloyd has turned up. That's just made my evening. Thank you, Alison. It's very kind. Another one of my clients turned up, Alison Jerry, for a very short period of time. Please do tell your friends about these Member Zone Facebook Lives. Well, they're Zoom Lives now. The tea and chats. So twice a month we do things like this. We have a guest speaker come in and share their knowledge, and then tea and chats are where you pose questions and me and one of the Canine Arthritis Teleguidance team answer them. They're there for community because, as you say, the emotional well-being of the animal is really important. You want somewhere to talk about it. Your emotional well-being is also really important, and that will reflect back on your animal, your dog, your cat.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to make sure that you are in a better place for that long, often stressful journey. So do tell your friends about the existence of CAM, the CAM Member Zone, etc., etc. Thanks, Robert, for your fab.
My pleasure, Hannah, as always.
Yeah. And we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes, you will. Of course, you've got the big conference coming up.
I know. Yes.
Yeah,
Everybody
really
should be
excited.
coming to the
Looking forward
Chronic
to that.
Pain Symposium. It's full
Yeah,
steam
I hope
ahead.
you're all signed up.
10 days and then it launches. It's going to be a killer.
It will be. Is it 4 days this year?
4.
Is it 4 days? Wow. That's a
4
marathon.
days.
I'll have to dig out the amphetamines.
Yes, I'm going to be on the Monday night drinking myself silly. But yes, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I actually have the pleasure to host all of it. So it's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to be,
Yeah, it's going to be a long session.
yes, it's going to be good. But it's all my heroes. It's going to be an
Yeah.
amazing vibe. It was last year, so it's great.
You'll be a
Right.
star, as always. Thanks
gonna be
ever so
fun.
much, Anna. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.